What do you know about psychedelics? Have you heard of psilocybin used for trauma therapy? Well, we're going to be talking all about that today as I welcome my special guest, Peg Peters from the Gathering Groups. Personally, I have done a psilocybin journey, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story and something that happened to me during my session there. It gets a little bit emotional, I'm not going to lie, because it's an emotional thing. We're tapping into deep parts of our soul, and it's exciting, but it's heavy as well. Peg has worked in this field for years and years now. He's definitely the expert. He actually started as an ordained minister, and then he moved into teaching at Simon Fraser University as a humanities professor. He's done some filmmaking with a company called Falling Frogs. And of course, he helped produce a powerful documentary, Dosed and Dosed 2. Okay, if you want more information on those, you can Google that. Peg is the CEO of the Gathering Groups, and he says that he blends all of his previous experiences to tackle the planet's crisis of isolation and loneliness. We are really excited to jump into this conversation today. Peg, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks a lot for having me on. This is so fun. We've known each other for a long time, and I've watched your journey at starting this beautiful online platform, and to see how people are just connecting to your vision of health, which is so much, it's not just about what I look like, it's really about the whole person. And I'm just so thrilled to be on here, Trace. So this is like, I'm kind of giddy with excitement
And
because, yeah, we've
I
known each
know.
other, yeah, 30 some years.
30 years, exactly. And what you just said is so true. We are so interested in the whole person. And I think there's a lot of communities in terms of the fitness space that are just about go on this exercise program, go on this diet, follow those things, reach your targets, and that's it. We at Move Daily Fitness are really about incorporating that wellness component. And I know it's so important to you as well, right? That looking at thyself, knowing thyself.
I think, and and I'll just kind of launch into a little bit my vision around wellness is, we have values at what we do at Gathering. We can talk about our group program, but I think even before that, I think I really want to talk about this idea of like we use the word psychedelic, because I'm coming on as a guy who's into plant medicines and using this group program. But the word even psychedelic, I'm bristling at how most people have translated it. They've translated it as like mind manifesting. So we see it as kind of a plant that you can take that can open up your mind to new ways of thinking. And while that is true, the real, the real translation is actually psyche is soul. It's this
Mm.
Greek word for the whole being. It's like our spirit, our soul, and it's about revealing our soul. And so for this work for me is actually, deeply in line with what your vision is, Tracy, because as you probably know, of course, is that so many of us, when it comes to movement, when it comes to health, fitness, eating, we're looking at patterns that maybe we've had with us for 20, 30 years in our life. And so by just saying, hey, I'm just going to follow this fitness plan and we can try it and we fail because we've been trapped into ways of thinking and feeling about ourselves as maybe not valuable, I'm not enough. I'm not lovable, and that these ideas and beliefs about ourselves lie way, way back in our childhood, in our growing up. They maybe be connected to moments of trauma in our life, and then we wonder why. We're in our 40s and 50s, and we're trying to get healthy, and we're like, why do I keep sabotaging this? I don't want this. But what we need to do is look back and are there these kind of elements on our life? And I see them as almost like little boulders in a stream
Mm.
that have been blocking flow in my life. And that these plant medicines, and we're coming back into our consciousness now. Now we've been around for thousands of years. These have been used in communal practices around our planet since human beings have been around here. And so they're just coming back into our awareness and our psychology and our research now at places like Johns Hopkins, and there's 143 universities currently doing research on psychedelics in our planet right now. So they're coming back into our awareness as incredible tools to lift and loosen those boulders in our life, those stuck places that have preventing us from really living according to our values, and being the kind of person we really want to be. And so that's kind of what my wife and I, Heather, that's our vision is how do we create safe, effective containers for people to work with these kind of medicines and really come into alignment with their true purpose. So that's kind of what we've been doing.
Yeah, I love it. And you are so right. It's these stuck places. And I find it so interesting. My background's in psychology, but then as a trainer, I would always look at my clients through the lens of psychology because, again, they would come to me, they would want just these plans to lose weight, to get fit. But what I was looking at and opening up Pandora's box to see was that there were so many moments along their story, along their journey, along their life that wrote on the slate of who they were and who they became and how they got stuck and how they're not motivated and why they sabotage themselves. Right. So there was all of these moments. And I think so many people just think, well, if I just have the right plan, then, I'll get it. It'll be fine. I'll be able to achieve my goals. But when you look back and you sort of explore, there are moments that, yes, right on the slate of our lives. And they can really keep us in that stuck place. So I love what you said about the boulders, because I think we can all relate to that we do have these moments where we feel stuck and we can't move forward for whatever reason. And what
Yeah.
I hear you saying is that with this new plant medicine, this therapy, there's a way to begin to loosen some of those boulders.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to understand that these medicines, first of all, they're safe. So that our number one value at Gathering is safety and what we call
Yeah.
a trauma-informed approach to working with people. So that means we really want to create a safety because these are powerful medicines, right? These are not just like, hey, it gives me a little high and it feels nice, you know. These are medicines that really open up our soul, right?
Yeah.
So if we do that in a setting that is not conducive to that, it can be a really difficult experience. By just grabbing a bunch of mushrooms and with a buddy at a party, you're like, oh, I just want to, you're like, you may be disturbing, psychic material inside of you that's going to open up and loosen. And we can talk about the neuroscience of what's happening. So why this happens, because we understand it now. We've got neuroimaging, we've got brain scans that we can see what's actually happening when our brain, those receptors begin to fire in new ways during this psychedelic experience. So we really want safety. We want a safe container for this to happen. We want integration. We want a community of people that I can talk to about some of these experiences. These medicines, to me, I'm really convinced that these medicines have never in history been designed to be done alone. We work with these medicines in our ancient practices all the way back to Greece at the Eleusinian Mysteries. That's this 2,000-year-old experience that was done for 2,000 years, once a year, just outside of Greece, as a way for men, women, slaves, kings, whoever could come to this where everyone's equal and they could have this altered state experience with a psychedelic to really face their mortality, to face fear. That's really what it was about. It was about fears are, as human beings, we live with anxiety. We have this ability to remember and we have this ability to predict. We're unique creatures that way. So we can look into our future and worry and go, what about this? What's going to happen to my kids? What's going to happen to my job? What's going to happen to my money? So, and that can create anxiety for us. We can also look back with memory and have these ideas of like, I'm not enough. I
Yeah.
failed. And we can begin to build this whole backpack of shame and guilt. So we come in with, this incredible cognitive ability to be able to remember and to be able to predict uniquely as a human being. But what comes with that is the price that we pay in the modern society, where we are no longer connected to communities. We're these isolated individuals, doing our lives, no longer really having spiritual communities that can hold us. Though, religions have failed to really become thriving places for us anymore. We no longer have these family structures that can hold us, where kind of our kids move away to find better jobs and live all over the world. And so now we're these, we have a pandemic comes along and really tests us. And we can see that many of us are so isolated and we no
Mhm.
longer have places to ask the deepest questions of our lives. Who are we? What are our purposes? Is there something larger? How do I find peace and connection in a world that is so isolating? And so these medicines are being studied again. And from 2015, we really see the publishing of academic research on these substances at universities saying, hey, what if we could use these substances to help relieve things like depression, anxiety, like treatment resistant depression. People have been stuck 20 plus years, right? That's how they define these things. They've tried everything and they're stuck in bed. They can't get out. They can't get motivated. And scientists don't know what to do with some of these things. We can give people antidepressants, and we've done that to the hundreds of millions of people on our planet. And yet it all it does is it mute these feelings. And so we know we don't feel alive anymore. We feel kind of deadened by some of these substances. And along comes these plant medicines to be kind of a resurgence in our population. And it says, whoa, what if through a process of working with a group of people and some facilitators, I can prepare myself for an experience with these medicines where I can open up my heart to be able to allow these emotions to flow. Maybe it's grief, maybe it's unprocessed trauma. And these medicines can open that up, and in a container of safety and trust that can be worked with, and you can flow through and allow yourself to feel like I'm 1,000 pounds lighter, right? So this is the kind of work that we're seeing, and our team has been working with these kind of medicines in group models for about 3 years now. We've probably done about 400 experiences, so almost 60 retreats we've done. And what we're seeing and what we're learning is absolutely unbelievable. And we're really excited because we were able to take this data and we applied to Health Canada to do a clinical trial, and they approved it. So this is
Oh,
the first of its kind, a
cool.
group-based clinical trial for first responders, police, firefighters, veterans, and ambulance first responders. So we're going to look at trauma resolution using our 12-week group model, working with psilocybin. So that starts in January, and we're really excited about kind of to prove out that we can do this safely. So yeah, that's a little bit about, how our model works, and why I think it's such an important part of what mental health is going to look like in the next 10 years.
Yeah, that is really exciting. One of the things you said was that, at this age, it seems to be midlife, we do start asking those questions. Why? Who am I? Where do I belong? What's my value? What's my purpose? Like a lot of those questions do seem to rise in our midlife. You came into this field. You were first an ordained minister. You worked in film. Of course, you helped create the film Dosed 2, which is an amazing documentary on this whole plant medicine process. But then you segued into psychedelics yourself. So how do you go from being an ordained minister to in a community that might go, wow, drugs? I don't know if
Yeah,
that's a good
I know. We're in
combination.
a Bible Belt here in the Fraser
Right?
Valley, and
Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah. No,
how did
it
that all
is.
happen?
Yeah, it's an amazing. As I look back and I go, how did this, how did I land here? I think I'll have to kind of go to my own personal experience with plant medicine. So my friend Dave, who's a marriage and family therapist, has been a close friend of mine. We really began to research some of this material in about 2015, 2016. I'd read an article, I think it was Time magazine, called The God Molecule, and they
Oh,
were looking at people coming out of a study that was being done. There was an end of life study. So people they had 6 months to live. They were dying of cancer. This is at Johns Hopkins, and they were dealing with end of life dread. Now, this was a horrific documented experience where people are waking up with just this the ominous feeling that they're going to die, and they can't be in the moment because they're just like, I'm not gonna see my daughter get married. I'm not, and they're just overwhelmed all the time by that because they know there's an end date. They've got cancer, terminal cancer, and it's a horrific experience, right? So this isn't about physical pain. This is about emotional dread, and nothing was fixing these people. And so they did this study by they looking at a high dose psilocybin experience by giving them psychedelic mushrooms extract, and then they give them about 3 prep sessions with a therapist talking about this. Then they'd have one experience. This isn't about taking a pill over and over. one experience for 4 to 5 hours with eye shades and a headphones with two therapists. And then these people would come out of this experience and they'd say, well, what happened? What were you reporting? And 89% of these people, now that, I mean, any kind of study that you're getting a 10% shift is shocking, right? 89% of these people were saying, I had what only can be described as some kind of mystical experience where I felt that my life is meaningful, that
Mm.
I have purpose, that this cancer was not the dominating monster in my kind of face, but it began to be something that in essence diminished in my kind of inside. And I go, okay, so what? I'm going to die in 6 months. I'm going to live each moment and be grateful and excited and be present for each. And the dread of that somehow went away. Like the fear of death was dissolved. And not in a few, in 89% of these people. And
That's
the
amazing.
researchers couldn't believe that. And I read that article, and these people were describing, these are atheists, these are people who, whatever religious background they had, they were all saying they encountered something, some kind of benevolent force that kind of connected with them on this experience and gave them this feeling that they're loved, that they're enough, that they have, that they can live the rest of their life with peace. And you're like, I can't fake that. That's not about a cognitive process. It's an
No.
experience someone has directly with this inner knower. And so we can use language, scientific language, like that internal family systems would say. What happened is these parts that were so overwhelmed by the trauma of their impending death, those parts got diminished and their true self came online. The
Mm.
sense of their true knower kind of stepped forward in this experience without fear and gave them a sense that they are enough. Or you can use mystical language, right? They maybe encountered some kind of spiritual presence that gave them this sense of peace. So when I started reading that, I was so intrigued and
Yeah.
fascinated. And so Dave and I were having lots of conversations about, let's find the research, let's read about this. This could be really helpful for people. And then about 2017, I was like, I want to have this experience myself. Like, I don't want to just read about it. Like everything I was reading said you can read about. It's like, I mean, I'll just say this bluntly. You can read people talking about sex. It's like, oh, sex is interesting. You can read, or you can actually experience, the pleasure of engaging with another live human being and finding the pleasure from that. That's what this experience was like. You actually had to feel it and
Mm.
experience it for yourself. So I managed to find two therapists in the underground because this is
Yeah.
really early days. And
That's right.
no one was kind of talking about what they were doing. It was still really illegal and underground. And so I found some therapists and worked through some prep, and then had my first experience. And that was like, it was so it was such a profound experience for me personally and on a
Mm.
number of levels. And one of the first ones, and I'll just kind of say the physiological one. I have ADHD, and it's a beautiful gift at times, but it can be really overwhelming inside my head because I can feel like lots of energy and lots of things are just talking to me all the time, and it can be really like noisy.
Mm.
And during my psychedelic experience, there was a stillness and a quietness inside my mind. I was still Peg. I was still aware, but all the voices, it's like all the parts just sat down nicely in a row and were just like quiet and letting me step forward. And I remember just weeping. Like it was just like I never felt that kind of stillness inside. And and all of a sudden, I dealt with issues of shame. I dealt with it's all of these kind of issues came up and dissolved away. I began to see my four daughters, and each of them I had a unique relationship, and that was honored, and I kind of felt loved and blessed by them. I had this connection with my wife, and there was this a shift that occurred with me about learning to listen to her in new ways. This experience really unfolded for me. This how noisy I had been in my life, and just in my frenetic way, I had, I'm kind and always been a nice guy, but I had been in essence undermining and not listening to Heather in ways that I really wanted to value her. And these are insights that came to me, and they weren't like, oh, that's a thought to have. It was a feeling that shifted. And I felt this profound healing had occurred. And I mean, there's so many other levels that happened from one experience. And
Yeah.
that shift that happened inside of me, I said, man, I want to cultivate this now because it was just a mountaintop experience, right? You got to come down, and how do you integrate it? How do you talk to it about with other people? And how do you, keep these kind of insights alive in you now, rather than it just being, oh, that was a neat experience I had, and then in 2 weeks I'm just back to the normal peg. So I realized that there's a neuroplastic window of about 6 to 8 weeks where behavior change could happen. And there was a motivation inside of me naturally for new behaviors, new ways of working with myself. And so I started meditating, even just 5 minutes a day, just finding some time to be quiet. I couldn't do that before. I tried meditation and the Calm app and Sam Harris waking up, and I just couldn't. My thoughts would just wander a million places and I just couldn't focus. But after my first psychedelic experience, there was a window. There was a bit of a gap between the immediate thought and the immediate next one. And I thought, I wonder if I could cultivate that a little bit. And so that's really one of the first things that I began was cultivating a daily practice of just sitting in quiet, working and allowing emotions to come up and dissolve, allowing my thoughts to come up and dissolve. And that practice became something I started to nurture in myself. So that was just one takeaway. And I began to have a really kind of a new way of thinking about my spiritual life, my emotional, my physical, my mental life, all of those. In essence, I could kind of take my backpack of my life, dump it out on a table and say, why have I been holding this thing for 20
Yeah.
years? Why am I stuck on this? How can I let that go? And so it really gave me lots of agency to start working with myself in new ways. And so that profound personal experience, opened up a whole bunch of other kind of avenues for me. And I realized this is an area I really want to explore. How do we bring this kind of medicine into our culture in a way that's safe and in a way that's effective in long-term change, not just giving someone one experience, but actually behavioral change that we can measure in 6 months and a year and 2-year follow-ups. That's what I was really interested in. So that's why we really began to look at gathering groups as a model that we could create to do that. Yeah.
I love that. When I think about my own journey, and I did that with you in the gathering groups and your team there. I just want to share my one profound story, and then I want to talk about what you were just talking about there, which is that integration process. And if we do decide to do something like this, what's happening in our brains, or how do we begin that shift for our lives forever and ever? So my story here, that was truly like so simple, and yet it has shifted my life so profoundly. So you go into the session, and when you're first starting to integrate, it's a little, for me, I was scared. I was really scared to do it because I had never done anything besides drink alcohol in my life before, like no drugs, nothing, right? And so my first kick at the can was with this psilocybin. And so I was very, very nervous. I was lying on, you lie down, like Peg said, with shades and earphones, and you're listening to a curated playlist, which is really helpful to get you thinking about different things in your life. And I was scared. So all of a sudden, I called out for the therapist to help, and I had a hand on each side. And one of the therapists there, she had an elastic band around her hand, and it was a hair elastic. And because I was afraid, I reached my pinky finger around the elastic band and grabbed onto it. And all of a sudden, it was so awesome. And all of a sudden, this profound realization came to me that when I'm afraid, I forsake authenticity for the sake of attachment, and I attach. And I'll just get emotional thinking about it, but I sat up, I pulled my eye shades off, and I said to all of you in the room, did you just see that? Like, it was so cool and so profound for me that I thought, oh my goodness, this is what I've done my whole life. This is what I do when I'm afraid. I am not the real me. I am not my authentic self. I don't speak with my authentic voice. I attach to people because that makes me feel safe. And so, yeah, what I found since that moment is that that's available to me, that concept, that realization, where it wasn't before. It just wasn't there. It wasn't in my brain. It wasn't in my consciousness. And now when I see myself doing that, and it's not like I automatically stop doing those behaviors, right? They're still there, but that consciousness of what I can choose now to be authentic in the moment instead of to attach is is there for me. And it's unreal. It's so cool.
Wow. Oh, Trace, that is such a, I remember that. It was such a profound moment. And it's something so simple, but yet what happens in these spaces, right, is that while you're under while the mushroom is in you, there's this, your default mode network, the part of our brain that kind of is busy. And it's just like the monkey mind. Oh, I got to do this. I got to pick up the kids. I got to go do that. What I'm going to make for dinner. And all that stuff that's going on in our heads right up here, that all kind of quiets down. And what
Mhm.
happens is all these other neural connections begin to form during this experience. And so something as simple as just tucking a pinky finger underneath an elastic, you're like, oh, that's not just a metaphor. That becomes an experience you have. You're like, this is what I do. I,
Yes.
I hook in this kind of way for attachment rather than using my authentic voice. I mean, Gabor Mate, I mean, that's at the core of what he's talking about in the myth of normal, right? We
Mm.
get into this toxic culture in our societies, and what we do is we trade our voice. We trade our authentic voice that says, this is who I am. We trade that in order to belong. We have to, because that's belonging is survival. And so many of us in family systems that have not allowed us to have a voice that says, Peg, you're too much, you're too hyper, you're too expressive. Can you just tone that down? We learn, in order to belong, I have to take
Yeah.
the essence of who I am and reduce that down, and then I can be acceptable and belong. So that experience for you, Tracy, that feels so small, it's at the core of your being, at the core
Yeah.
of mine, that I have a voice that I can use and I can be okay and I can find safety and attachment right here. And I don't need to grab a hold and diminish my voice anymore. I can have my voice and feel strong and attached to myself. That is that's a game changer in life. That's a
Yeah.
game changer.
Yeah.
You think that's just something small. That's not. That's the rest of your life will be
That's it. I
shifted.
know. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that
So a
just
lot of
makes me
your
so excited.
I know it really is. A lot of your work, of course, is helping people find their authentic selves, their wise self. Can you talk to us about that process and why it's so important that we connect with that wise part of us?
Yeah. I'm going to talk about it in the scope of the container of why we do this in groups. Um, so we launched a model that uses 6 to 8 people that come into a community of practice. They meet once a week online for 90 minutes with two facilitators. And so we prep for 8 weeks before you come to the retreat. So you can be anywhere in the world. You come in this group, you all get to know each other over the course of 8 weeks, getting tools of connection. Then you come to the retreat all together for 2 nights, stay the night, do the journey, then integrate after. So why the group is so important is what happens is most of us have lived really we haven't been honest with our voice. we
Yeah.
we live in a culture that is so performance based, and we have Instagram and all these kind of social media opportunities to present a certain version of ourselves, curated and all scrubbed up. And so that gets reinforced that the true me cannot be shown to the people out there because they won't accept me. I'm not enough. I'm not thin enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not whatever enough. You fill that in. But that not enoughness haunts us in a culture where we have, thousands of people that in essence are looking at us. And so what happens with the self, this true authentic self, that gets buried, right? It gets kind of diminished. And all these other parts of us kind of begin to take over. And these parts have been formed throughout our life, these little parts of me that maybe have been are formed from trauma. Maybe they're formed from experiences where I've been diminished, and they are asking for a lot of attention because they're really young, right? There may be
Mhm.
something that happened to me when I was 8 that never really got integrated, and that gets stuck at the age of 8. And so now I have an 8-year-old Peg running me that is freaking out, and so these little parts take over in our life at times. And it feels like, we ask ourselves these questions. why did I react that way? Why did I get so defensive with my partner? I act like a 5-year-old, you know, all grumpy, and that's not my value. It's what we're doing is we're slipping into these old patterns and parts, you know, IFS language that we use of these of Dick Schwartz. We use these parts as a way to kind of protect ourselves, and we don't even know we're operating them. But when we come into a group that's really safe, and that we have a real safe container of trust, and we begin to use questions to help us reveal some of these, the protective parts. We usually start with our critic, this part of us that we all have that says, you know what, Peg, you can do better. You got to do better. This, what you did over here was crazy. And some of it's just like at that level, it's really nice. But some of our critics, our internal critics, they're toxic. They're this so destructive, and the tone of voice. If you start talking to people about what's the tone of voice inside, it'll bring you to tears, because you would never talk to another human being with some of the tones of voice we have, right? We get into these narratives that I'm a failure. I'm a piece of shit. And that's the kind of narrative that we have in our head about ourselves. And so what we do is we slowly try to uncover the critic. We try to uncover some of these ways that we've been working with ourselves. And as we do that in a community of a group of 6 to 8 other individuals in a real safe community, what we hear reflected back to us is compassion, is understanding. And when we begin to hear it, maybe sometimes these parts of ourselves have never heard that before,
That's
because
right.
you've never chose to reveal these parts. So now we show just a little bit. We say, I'll maybe show this group of strangers just a little bit. And what we get back is kindness,
Mm,
compassion, love, presence. People are not one-upping me, and they're not responding, well, that's nothing. Let me tell you something, that they're doing is they're giving an embodied response. We teach these skills of how to embody someone else's share. So when they're sharing, I'm listening with my body, not with my mind. I'm listening with my body. And I'm saying, this is where I felt tightness in my chest when you were talking about that. Like when you were talking about that moment of tucking your finger underneath that, that elastic band, that hair tie. I felt right with you in that moment. And I felt this kind of tightness coming up. And then all of a sudden, when you talked about how much, freedom you had from that experience, I felt this opening, right? So I could track that in my body, right? That's how we teach people to respond. And what happens week by week is these little scared kids inside of us begin to start going, hey, maybe I can show up at week 3 and these people aren't going to judge me. Maybe week 4, I think I can be even more honest. And by the time we get to about week 6, these little parts feel really safe in these groups. And they can come out and say, I feel like a failure. I feel like this. These are ways that I've never talked to other people about. And this container begins to hold that. And when we feel self-compassion on board and this sense of nurture in the group, all of a sudden there's this a real vulnerability, and the group begins to form this beautiful cohesion of safety. And when there's safety and vulnerability, there can be healing. And so we self-compassion is one of the most primary tools that we use. And when you hear it from other people, you could begin to start feeling that energy and to bring it back into yourself. It's one thing to give someone else compassion, right? We're so good at that. We can give our kids compassion, our friends, but to turn it inside, that's a really difficult move. And most of us are not taught how to do that. And this process teaches that, of being seen and known in a group of others, so that we can feel the compassion, so that we can then take the risk of bringing compassion to our interior parts. And when that happens, oh, there can be a real letting go. And then when the compassion comes in, this true self begins to step forward. The one that is not damaged by the trauma, has not been burdened by all of the stuff that we've encountered in our life. That true self can emerge. It's in essence, it's our divine being that has always been in there. And it begins to start finding energy and stepping forward and saying, let me tell you who I truly am. I do have compassion. I have clarity. I have insight. I have wisdom for myself. And this process opens up this inner healing wisdom that the self can step forward and, in essence, take charge of your life and say, okay, let me run the show, rather than these little kid parts that have been running my entire life for the last 30 years. Let the true self run this kind of this kind of scene. And I had a friend of mine describe it like he was on a bus inside of his journey. And he said it was like a bunch of 8 or 9-year olds just going crazy in a bus. and but this is an inside, this is what happened in his journey. And it was just chaos inside, and people are standing on seats and throwing food, and that just feels like chaos in there. And he said it was like I pulled the bus over and I stopped driving the bus and I stood up and said, okay, time out. Everyone sit down. Everyone kind of sat down in the bus. And he said, I'm sorry. I have not been attentive to what's been going on in this bus for 30 years. I've been just scared driving as fast as I could. I'm going to be in charge now, and I'm going to help take care and bring some order to this bus. We're going to get you to where you need to go, and I'm going to take care of each one of you. I promise. I will come back and we will have a conversation. But right now, I want to let you know I've got this. And
Mm.
in that moment, there was like a settling in his nervous system. Now, you can't force someone to do that, but that happened naturally when he was on psilocybin, and there was an order and a structure that kind of came into his nervous system. And ever since then, he says, I now have access to this inner healing wisdom inside of me that I can begin to access on a daily basis and nurture that self energy on a day-to-day basis. So that's kind of what we mean by using parts in our program as a way to access inner self strength, to bring kind of self agency and empowerment back into your life.
It really is about that access that's available to you. I find it hilarious almost that I chose this profession in my life. My therapist said to me once, we choose the things in our lives that we need to wake ourselves up. And so I'm in a place where I'm constantly being judged, and like 10 out of 10, what's the scorecard? And I'm constantly looking in the comments. I'm looking, at the feedback. What do people think about me? How do they observe me? Do they like my workouts? Do they like my coaching? And if there's anything negative, it's very challenging for me, right? So I think it's hilarious that one of my parts, is this. So there are these things called parts cards. Were they from Dick
Yep.
Schwartz?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they're really interesting because they're little cartoon pictures that can really help you determine or think about what some of your parts might be. So one of the cards is a Barbie doll, and she's standing there with her hair all done perfect, her body's perfect, everything's perfect, and then the people behind her are giving her a score. I'm like, oh my goodness, that's me. That's what I'm constantly doing. And for me to, yes, be in this profession where I'm choosing that is, yeah, again, really funny to me. But when I came into the journey with the gathering groups, and right before the night before, we had a little gathering together where we were talking about how we were feeling about going into the session. And I was scared and self-conscious, and we were sitting around in the circle, and we were all supposed to share sort of how we were feeling. And immediately I just wanted to shut down and go to my room. And one of the therapists said, actually, we want you to stay here and be seen by these people that you've already journeyed with for 8 weeks, right? And oh, the fight, because I wanted them all to think that I didn't have a problem, that I didn't have an issue, that I was perfect. And for me to be vulnerable right in that moment, it was like in real time that I could practice allowing that wise self. And the wise self bawled her eyes out. The wise self cried and was vulnerable. And just so like you said, the moment of being around those other people and them doing that embodied listening and being able to reflect back to you that when you are vulnerable, when you are authentic, this is our response. We
Oh,
love you. We feel
yeah.
connected to you when you are like this, not when you are the Barbie doll. And
Right. Oh,
again,
Trace, like,
I know.
like you and I have this ongoing joke, probably for 30 years of like, I love seeing little Tracy,
Yeah, that's
right?
right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and what that means is just this vulnerable part of you that you're so scared to show at times, because it doesn't have everything all together, and it makes mistakes, and it's normal, and it's like that part has always been, it's hard for you to show that part. And I mean, I can't believe, by doing this podcast and
Yeah.
talking about it, you're showing that your core self is so much stronger than the fear of being seen, because you're saying, I'm bringing it out there. I'm telling you my story right now, right?
Yeah.
And so I love that on this experience that you had, that was exactly what occurred the night before. this same
Bingo.
pattern of like, if I can just go away and go back to my room and
Yeah.
not be seen by this group, everything will be fine. And yet that's exactly what needed to happen for you to come back into community and say, no, we want to see the real you. We want to see the you that's got messiness. And it's in that when we see that part that we're so, well, I lean forward and I go, "Oh, I want more of that.
Yeah.
That feels attractive. And we
Yeah.
all want that. We can't relate to people that put these fake worlds up there. We're like, I'll never be like that. So I can never connect with them.
Yeah.
So your ability, Tracy, to own who you are and to talk about it and be honest, I think it really is a testimony to why you have these beautiful community that's forming around you. Because
Mm.
I think these people that are listening and following you are saying, I want a different way of thinking about myself, not just physically. I want a holistic way of thinking about
Mm.
myself. And I want to accept these parts of me that's sometimes difficult to accept. And you're modeling that, Trace. And I think it's so inspiring. And I love that you even brought that up as like, this was my challenge in
Yeah.
my journey was, will I be seen even in my messiness? Or can I be authentic and be honest about who I really am and still be loved and included in the community? So that's why these group models that terrify everyone. They're like, I can't do it in a group. And I'm like, this is what we need most. We need to be seen safely by a group of people in order to heal. And I just can't say this enough. We need to get connected in community. This is the thing that I will, more than anything else, more than even plant medicines, is I really believe in the power of community. Community is the medicine we need in our culture right now. We need belonging. We need to be heard and seen, and we need communities that know how to be safe and not to judge, but to hold all of our experiences and to say, we've got you. And this model that we work with is really designed to be this community of practice to create that kind of vulnerability for people to really transform. And then the medicines, oh, they just open our hearts up. They're just these beautiful tools that come along and that we ally with to for more vulnerability and healing and allowing these stuck places to open up. So that's, oh, Trace, I love that little Trace is coming out. It's so beautiful.
She's here.
Yeah.
Um, so I feel like, is it a North American thing that we're not being connected with our community like this? Um, yeah, it was a new experience to be vulnerable and open in community. Normally, we're going to a therapist, it's one-on-one. And then, after we run out of money to pay for the therapist, we sort of are left on our own, or we might have some books to read. But this is a bit of a different experience like that. So why community? Are there other communities that you are taking your lead from? And tell us the importance of that.
Yeah. I read a book by an author named Johan Hari called Lost Connections. And
Mm.
I really recommend it for your audience. It's a really powerful book about understanding the rise of antidepressant medication. And it
Mm.
sounds like a boring topic. Like, who wants to know the history of antidepressants? It's not really that, but it really tracks that as the through line. And what the author is really looking at is he tracks the sociological factors that have made us more and more and more isolated from our
Mm.
families, from communities, from neighborhood pubs to neighborhood community events. That we live these isolated online lives, and we don't have real kind of community anymore. And so what happens as that happens, people are feeling more isolated. Depression goes up. And so there's almost like a one-to-one correlation. And he tracks it by the millions. And this is not North America. This is European. This is all kind of any Western nation is experiencing this kind of crisis of isolation, loneliness, depression, and anxiety. Our mental health is not doing well as a planet right now. And so as this happens, this people start turning to antidepressant medications to mute the effects of these dark, deep places of anxiety and fear. So we just kind of numbed. But in it, he says what we really need is not more medications like this. We need community. We need to build community. We need to foster places where we can be seen by other people. And so that book, when I read that, that was a real kind of turning point for me to realize it's plant medicine is great, but it's not just another tool for a therapist. To me, we need new models. We don't just need another tool for a therapist. We need new models of how we're going to be seen and heard in community. And so this, when I kind of encountered this model, this resilience model of working in a 12-week program using online technology. So we're using Zoom as a platform. And what we're
Mhm.
doing is we're actually doing something called co-regulation. Now, what that means is that using a theory called polyvagal theory, and this is developed by Dr. Stephen Porges. What he notices is that our nervous system can only calm down out of this hyper aroused state into what we call the rest and digest state, where we're in these calm states. We can only do that when we're seen by other human beings. And what we do is we need to see their eyes, their mouth, and their voice. There's vagal
Okay.
nerves that attach to all those, and we can see the smile creases. We can see the smile on our face, and we can see when you hear the undulating voice, our nervous systems begin to calm down when we're in those kind of settings.
Hmm.
So we can only do that when we're in settings where we're
Right.
calm, nervous systems of other people. So by putting people in online communities like this and creating questions that can really help us feel seen and known, we begin to co-regulate in a group of other people after a number of weeks, where when we turn on the camera, we see these familiar faces, and our nervous system goes, these people are safe. I can
Mm-hmm.
open up. And when
Mm-hmm.
that happens, it's almost an imperceptible feeling. There's the safety that comes over our nervous system. It takes about 4 weeks, we've found that you need about 4 weeks of this group work for your nervous system to start to reset. And then when that happens, you can really start to feel like these people actually are not judging me. They actually love me. And when there's a feeling, a presence of love and connection, then there's a safety that begins to happen. And so for us, this group model is essential for this idea of healing, the idea of our inner self coming online, this idea of safety, the idea of self-compassion. It's all connected to this feeling of being seen and known in a group context. So for me, the most powerful medicine is this group process that we do. And then it's really on the retreat where we just prime that a little bit more by opening the heart space up using psilocybin or MDMA or ketamine or cannabis. These are all different kind of medicine approaches that can be used for different things and used in group containers for different purposes. And so that's kind of how our model works, is really the power of connection as the healing factor in people's lives.
I think safety is a real big component. And I like what you said just about how you cultivate that feeling of safety when you're doing the pre sessions leading up to a psilocybin journey. How do you keep your participants safe throughout the journey? I mean, you must have encountered lots of different things. You usually have a group of 5 to 6 people there, multiple therapists, of course, overseeing and helping through that whole time. But what's the safety protocol look like through a session?
Yeah, so I think safety starts right off the bat, which is when you apply for a gathering group, there is a screening process. We have a nurse who's a mental health nurse, and will just kind of take your history. And this isn't a counseling session. It's just really like, tell me what's bringing you in here. What medications are you on? Do you have any history of psychosis? Do you have a history of, severe mental health? Because that might be a real acute issue that
Sure.
at this group work might not be the best first response for you. You might need to get stabilized before you kind of come into a group process. So we have different tracks that we can offer people when they first apply. So safety starts with that, by just creating a safe place for people kind of can tell their story and to be able to be held. And then we put you in a group with experienced facilitators that know how to create, and this is really important when it comes to what we call a trauma-informed model. Trauma-informed means that you have to have a predictable container. So you need to be thinking, on Tuesday night when I go online on this group, what's going to happen? Is it going to be crazy? Is someone's going to dominate for an hour and maybe judge me? And so what we need is we create a really structured, and for me, I was really nervous about a structured model because I love like free flow and working with just flying off the cuff. But I realized that when you're working with trauma, you need predictability.
Mm,
This is when it starts. This is when it ends. It's 90 minutes. It's not 100. It's 90 minutes.
yeah.
This happens for 5 minutes. You will have 3 minutes to share. You'll have three people that will respond to you. They have a, so it feels like, it feels kind of rigid, but it's not rigid. What it's structured, and
Structured.
structure really allows us to calm down. Because then I know no one's going to be talking for more than 3 minutes. No
Yeah.
one can interrupt me. And there's a certain way of facilitation that's going to be provided so that when something comes up, the facilitators know exactly how to respond and how to create this really safe, group container so that everyone feels included, everyone has a voice, and every part of you belongs. So that's kind of happens week after week, as in these containers. So it's predictable. There's a structure. There is screening. There's therapeutic interventions, and then for some people, we'll check in with them and we'll say, how's this process going? And they're like, I'm finding it really hard. It's week 4 and I'm terrified to turn my camera on every week. And I say, okay, could we offer you maybe some one-on-one work alongside of the group work? And so
Mm.
maybe they need a couple of therapy sessions just to really help them, face some of those fears that's coming up, because this process does trigger, unprocessed material. So maybe they need some interventions outside of that. And then they take you into their journey. We really slow down the process, right? For us, if any of your listeners is interested in exploring plant medicine work, the number one thing I want to say is do your research. Be really careful on who you're going to do this work with. Don't just say, hey, I heard this person is really good with, they're kind of some shaman. They took a course for a week and now they want to do, ayahuasca with you. I
Mm.
just be like, whoa, this is deep, deep work. You want to do this work with people that really have experience in working with these medicines, in working in these containers. And so we want to slow the process down. So for us, that's why we work for 8 weeks before you're going to come to the retreat, so that you have all your questions are answered. You really feel prepared. You have clear intentions of what you're looking for this journey. And then you know the people in the room, right? You feel really safe and excited to be with them. When that happens, the journey on the weekend can be really powerful and profound. And then we have a month to integrate that work together as a group, meeting back online, showing up and saying, hey, here's the insight I got from my journey. And you have a group of people and now friends that can hold you, connect with you, so that even when the 12-week process is over, we offer microdosing courses for people that want to maybe still work with the mushroom, but at an imperceptible dose. We offer alumni groups who might say, hey, you know what? That first journey just opened me up, recognizing that I do have a beautiful self inside of me, but it just opened me up. I want to go deeper. So we offer, 6-week alumni groups. We also offer courses, or people could stay connected with their group. They don't even need a facilitator now. They know the process. They know how to create these safe containers. So many of our groups continue to meet without their facilitators. They've got a new group of friends now that really once a month they go online usually and they say, hey, let's catch up. Remember our journey 6 months ago? What's been coming up for you since then? And for a lot of people, by staying connected in these little online groups, they have now a place where they've worked hard to establish the safety, and they've got these kind of people that are cheering them on and to say, hey, this is what's happening for you, what's happening for me. And so we have this kind of beautiful sharing space that gets created in the Gathering alumni platform. So that's kind of a little bit about how safety works for us. And it really starts from that first call all the way through the process, and to hold you even after the journey, because some of these journeys, they can be really big and they bring up some really deep unprocessed trauma that even just 4 weeks of integration isn't going to put it all back together. So we recommend maybe another group, or working with a therapist, or working with your group to continue to process what's coming up. And so we want to stay with a person on that journey, as they kind of unpack that. So that's a little bit about how we work with safety.
Yeah, and I certainly felt that way through my whole process with you guys. That's for sure. If some, this is not going to be for everyone, of course, but growing and changing and shifting should be for everyone. So if someone was not to do a journey like this, but you were to think about maybe our target audience here, who is that woman in midlife, what would be some advice that you would give them to grow thyself?
Well, I would say first of all, even like we'll put plant medicines aside. You might just be hearing this conversation. This might be new to a lot of people and saying, "Whoa, that's a big step for me." It's the war on drugs that was started in the 70s, took these beautiful plant medicines that were being researched in the 50s and 60s, and it criminalized them sadly, along with some of these really harsh drugs like cocaine and other kind of stimulants. These are not drugs like that. These are heart-opening plant medicines. But let's just put them aside and say, okay, listen, this maybe gets people looking and starting to read and listen to some podcasts, and they really want to understand this process. And they might check out the Gathering Group's, website and look at our offerings. But what about the person who says, I'm not quite ready for that? What can they do? I would say, first of all, I don't know how to say this more strongly, but if you can find even one person in your life that you can feel safe with, maybe it's your partner, maybe it's your best friend, and you can say, hey, I really want to go on a journey of learning about myself, but I
Mm.
don't want to do that by myself. I want to do it with a friend. Maybe we could do a book together. Maybe we can start listening to some podcasts together. But I really want to find someone that I can, be on this journey with. Might be a therapist, but it doesn't have to be. And so my first recommend is don't journey alone. Don't kind of go into this self-exploration by yourself. Reach
Mhm.
out, even through your channel, find people through, Move Daily that you can maybe go, hey, someone in my local area, we can meet for coffee once a month or something. And you can really find someone that can begin to kind of witness you back, right? And say,
Right.
let me tell you what I see in you,
Yeah.
because we're trapped in our own minds. And if, most people will listen to podcasts and books and kind of journaling and do that, but the problem is our shadow is what's preventing us from really healing. And we don't see our shadow. That's why it's a shadow. Every time we turn around, the shadow keeps moving, right?
That's a
So
good
shadow
point.
work from
Yeah.
from Jung is a perfect word, because he really describes this process that the shadow is invisible to us because we can't see it, right? We need the view of others to be able to say, oh, Peg, let me show you what you don't even see, the beauty that sometimes gets hidden by your own kind of, you get trapped in your own
Yeah.
thoughts. And so the number one goal I would say is find someone that you can be honest and open with. And if you can't find that, then reach out to communities like this or Gathering to be able to say, I'm done living isolated and alone. And once you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, that's the opportunity for transformation and change, right? The second thing I would really recommend is to really kind of start looking at some of these thinkers that have given us tools, things like breath work, for instance. Breath is an incredibly powerful tool that can get us out of our heads and into our bodies. And we use breath work in Gathering every week. We start with like 5 to 10 minutes of breath work, and it can be as simple as a 4-4 box breathing, right? In for four through your nose, hold for four counts, out for four out of your mouth, and hold for four, right? Just if you think of it as a box, the 4-4 breath, that can just be a beautiful practice you can do in the car, you can do anywhere. And that's something you have with you all the time. So just tell yourself, I'm going to start introducing 5 minutes of breath work into my life. I'm just going to try that and see what happens. Just a way to calm yourself down, right?
Mhm.
So breath work is a big thing I ask people to explore because it's something we have with us all the time. And then, as a lot of people do, journaling practice. Journaling prompts can be a really beautiful way of not writing for someone else, just free form writing to a pre-thought about question. You can find questions that just prompt you, what are some of my fears in life? Who do I want to be? If I could look at my life right now and I could change one thing, what would that be? And what's holding me back from making those changes, right? Though just journal like that, but make it a limited time. Journal for 5 to 10 minutes and then put it aside. Don't make this a hour-long exercise. It can overwhelm. Put it aside and say, I can do that with my cup of coffee. So
Yeah.
these are just little prompts. If this is new to you, of doing some self-exploration and some self-work. There's beautiful, thinkers and authors like Dick Schwartz, No Bad Parts.
Love that
Um,
book. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
beautiful, right? And there's lots of really good material coming out right now on helping people learn to find their true voice, their true self. Gabor Mate's work is beautiful. Do a book study with someone on the myth of normal. Just really get into that and say, hey, let's talk about this book. And so if this is, if this interests people, there's a really great places to start before you get to maybe plant medicine work as really an advanced tool to really get into these stuck places. But I really want to, tell people, if you are all interested in doing plant medicine work, the gathering model is a really beautiful, safe container for kind of your first journey, right? We use medium to low dose psychedelic mushrooms, and we really slow the process down. And we've got a team that knows how to work with the body, knows how to work with the soul and the mind. And so this is a really beautiful container. If this is something you're interested in, you can do this anywhere in the world. Fly to our retreat center here just outside of Vancouver. We
Yeah.
put you up for 2 nights here. So you can check out Gathering Groups, our website. We have groups that launch every month. We have a couples group launching, my wife and I are doing, which is so exciting to see
Yeah.
plant medicine work as a way to help couples reconnect again, find their love again, allow their parts to kind of settle down so their true selves can meet each other again, to find what they first fell in love with each other about. These medicines are incredible at helping couples reconnect. And so we've been working on doing some couples groups, and they're really powerful. We've got co-ed groups, we've got women-only groups. So check us out, and that might be a great start if you're interested in plant medicine work.
So that's what's your handle that people can find you at?
Yeah. So it's gatheringgroups.ca is our website. You can check out Gathering Groups on Instagram as well. And we've got also a YouTube channel where we put a lot of master classes. So they're free.
Good.
So, there's, I don't know, 10 or 20 hours of free content about the history of psychedelics, psychedelics for mental health, spirituality and psychedelics. And so all sorts of classes you can just kind of, watch that. And there's me and Heather and other people talking about some of these topics so that you can really feel informed, because this is something you really want to feel like it's calling you. You can't
Yeah.
ever be pressured into this work. This has to be,
Right.
you feel full agency and going, "Yeah, I feel called to go do some deep dive because there's something in my life that's been stuck there a long time and I
Mhm.
want to feel free." This
Mhm.
work can really help you connect to that deep sense of freedom of who you really are.
So many low cost or no cost resources there. I'll be sure to link all of those in the show notes. Okay. And below in the description if you're watching this on YouTube. So check those out along with the books that Peg recommended, because I love what you said. Even, if you're not quite ready for something like this, doing a book where you can read it together, like the Parts book, No Bad Parts by Schwartz. I loved that book. And I've recommended it multiple times to my audience and members as well. But that's just a way that you can start this process of, moving forward in this journey. So I think that's awesome. Thank you for your honesty and authenticity. Oh, he's showing up a book right there, right now. The Wild
Yeah.
Edge of Sorrow by Francis
Oh,
Weller. Oh, yes. He's an
this is
old,
one of the most.
it's an older book. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of the most profound books on learning to let go and navigate areas of grief in our life, not death and loss grief, the losses that we've all experienced, losses of marriage, losses of dreams, loss of kind of careers, loss of health, loss of just navigating loss is such a human experience. Francis Weller does the best job, and I find that this work is really good pre-work to do before coming into plant medicine work. We've got to confront some of these areas of losses in our life. So I didn't want to forget Francis Weller.
Yeah.
He is such a wise gift to us.
Okay. I haven't read that book, but I will put it on my list for sure. Yeah, I loved the big rocks and how we can begin to shift some of those things that keep us stuck. I think that is such an important part of moving daily and moving forward in our own lives is knowing thyself and exploring those parts that we're scared to explore. I know that I have felt afraid, scared to explore those things, but once I did hard things. And if you follow our workouts, you know I say that all of the time, that we can do hard things and we can move through uncomfortable feelings. And that is a big part of growth. It's just sitting in the uncomfort. And when you can do that, you can come out the other side and you are stronger and you are wiser. And your truth self then has an opportunity to show her voice, to show his voice. And that's where I feel true growth happens. And so thank you so much for taking your time this morning to challenge us in our thinking about this group work. I think it's important. And I really value your friendship and, of course, all of the work that you are doing to help people improve their lives. So thank you so much, Peg.
Oh, thank you so much, Tracy. This has been so fun chatting with you. And I love your approach. I just think what you're doing is so beautiful because you're really looking at the whole person. And we need that. We need that in our day and age so much right now. So you are such a light out there for many, many people. And I just have so much love for you, Tracy. You're such an amazing, beautiful friend of mine. Thank you so much for having me on.
We sure do need that. Thank you, folks. As always, go move daily in your fitness, wellness, and nutrition. And we'll see you all in the next Move Daily Talks.